Howdy everyone. It's been a long time since I've tested a lens made by Zeiss, which doesn't have Sony's collaboration in manufacturing, so here we have one from their range for mirrorless APS-C cameras, the Zeiss Touit 32mm f1.8. It's an autofocus lens covering the APS-C sensor size, and it's only available on Sony E-mount and Fuji X mount. If you get the version for Fuji X system cameras, then it comes with a nice aperture control ring. Shame that Sony users don't get that too. When used on the APS-C cameras it's designed for, its field of view is the full frame equivalent of 48mm, so that's a perfect standard focal length, neither wide angle nor telephoto. Very handy for everyday photography and getting just a little emphasis on your subject, and at f1.8 a nice autofocus background and quicker shutter speeds. Handy. It does not have image stabilization though. It's about $700 in the US or £500 here in the UK, quite expensive really. Let's see if you're paying for quality or just the Zeiss label. The lens feels excellently made and it's beautifully designed, looking sleek and modern, and it only weighs 200 grams despite being made of metal. The focus ring is rubberized and turns very smoothly. It's electronically coupled with the focus motor, but it responds precisely when manually focusing. The autofocus system on a lens is a bit of a weak point. It's fairly quick, but adjusts itself a few times before taking a picture and makes an audible buzzing sound. Not too loud though, thankfully. Another issue I found is that the lens's aperture mechanism makes a clicking noise, and if you're shooting with the aperture topped down, you will hear it clicking down in every picture you take. Have a listen. The aperture mechanism has 9 rounded iris blades. Another problem is with using autofocus in video mode. It's pretty unsure of itself, and your microphone will pick up loads of focusing noises. The lens has a 52mm filter thread, nice and small, and it comes with quite a deep lens hood. Overall, while the build quality is quite lovely, the autofocus motor is a bit clunky. Well, now let's look at image quality. I'm testing it on my 24MP APS-C mirrorless camera, a Sony a5100. Inner camera corrections are turned on. At f1.8, sharpness in the middle of the image is quite good, although contrast is low. Over in the corners, we still see quite a high resolution, but the low contrast is now joined by ghosting. Stop down to f2.8 though for a huge improvement in contrast, and back in the middle, image quality is fantastically sharp. At f4 it's perfect there, and basically perfect in the corners too. The whole image frame remains this sharp down to f11, although at f16 some softness is creeping in from diffraction. Overall, this is clearly a very sharp lens, although the general image quality at f1.8 could be a lot punchier with more contrast. Let's look at distortion and vignetting. The lens projects some noticeable barrel distortion, a pet hate of mine on a standard lens. The corners gradually get very dark at f1.8 too. Stop down to f2.8 or f4 and they brighten up. Be sure to use in-camera corrections with this lens. The lens can focus down to about 30cm. At f1.8, the close-up image quality is a tiny bit soft. At f2.8, it's much sharper, and f4, excellent. How about work against bright light? When they get into your pictures or close to the edge, you'll see quite some flaring and loss of contrast. I'm afraid it's a below average performance here. Finally, bokeh. When I took it out shooting, the autofocus background seemed to be nice and soft on my camera's screen, but when I looked at the results back home on my computer, I noticed quite a lot of busyness and outlining, which looks sloppy. Occasionally, those backgrounds can look quite smooth though. Overall, the Zeiss lens looks pretty on the outside, and its optical resolution is very good, but for me, its glory ends there. I really didn't enjoy its autofocus system, and I was really unimpressed with the quality of its bokeh. Some people will like it, but this one's not for me, and certainly not at a price of £500. If you're using a Fuji camera, you might prefer the Fuji 35mm f1.4, which has a 66% wider aperture and is much less expensive. And if you're using a Sony camera, you'll be a bit better off, I think, with their image stabilized 35mm f1.8 OSS lens, which is image stabilized, much less expensive, almost as sharp, and has much smoother looking bokeh and quieter autofocus. This Zeiss lens is not bad, but it is really overpriced, and in the face of its competition, I really can't recommend it.